So I put into the chat box the link to the Nearpod login, and then there's the code to enter the Nearpod, EGISW. What I would recommend doing is copying that code, that way you don't have to like try to remember it. Then click on the link. When you get to the Nearpod sign in, there will be a place to enter that code, and that should take you to the beginning screen. You should see a screen with little cute dinosaurs on it that says Lifelong Learning Practices. So I'll give you just a moment to navigate over to Nearpod. As Jessica said, please do keep Zoom open in the background because that's how you will be able to hear. But as far as the presentation and interacting with the presentation, that will all be through Nearpod.
And Jared, if you want to go ahead and share your screen, I'll stop sharing.
Okay, sounds good.
If I can find that button. There we go.
I also wanted to say that as people are coming in through the waiting rooms, I'll keep putting in the Nearpod information so that they're not stopping to say, where are you at? So I just wanted to kind of give you a heads up, I'll be watching that.
Thanks,
yeah,
Jamie.
we have to repost that because when people join, they can't see the chat prior to them attending. So we haven't lost our minds. We're just keep posting it so that people will see it.
Okay, so I'm looking through, it looks like we have a lot of people. I'm not sure how many, I'm not going to count there, but it looks like most of you have been able to navigate here to Nearpod. So we will go ahead and begin.
Jared, you have 37 out of your 74 participants in there, so you might want to give it just a little, an extra minute.
Oh, okay, I'm just getting an error that says that this is a premium feature to have more than 40 students. We might have to, yeah.
Jamie, can we access it with one of ours accounts? I don't know if Jared, if there's a way for you to send it to a different account, and then Jamie and I both have a Premiere.
Jared, it is in our drive, correct?
Yes.
But because it's in your, let me see if I can open it really quick.
Okay, thank you. Okay. So
it is a learning and growing thing, this technology, we love it.
And who knew that?
Yeah, that there was a limit. So in case you missed that, there's a limit of 40 people, but Jamie and I have accounts that will allow more than that. So give us just a second while we get it switched over to one of our accounts.
So you haven't quite put it in the shared participant folder yet. So hold on just a second.
Okay.
I'll go to lifelong learning practices.
Okay.
So you're fine.
Okay. I can go ahead and begin because people will be able to see, if you're not able to get on Nearpod, you can see my screen. So you can follow along with this. And then when we do figure out the technical difficulties of having more than 40 participants, we will switch over. So to begin with, let me introduce myself. I'm Jared Lisenby. I will soon be a preschool specialist at USVE. I'm excited about joining the team in October. Because of that, you'll notice I don't have an email to contact me through because I don't have one assigned yet. I'm hoping that they'll assign me something like iamgroot@schools.utah.gov, but I kind of have a feeling it's going to be something really boring like my first name and last name separated by a period and at utah.gov, but we'll figure that out. In any case, you'll be able to find me. I have been a member of the Standards Writing Committee. I've been involved in this process for quite a number of years now as we've been working on it. I have experience as a preschool teacher, college educator, research scientist, preschool education coach, Head Start program administrator, and as I mentioned, soon to be a preschool specialist. I'm also the current president of the Utah Association for the Education of Young Children. Just wanted to put a plug in for that. Okay, let me check the, okay, thank you. Thanks, Tara. Okay. So today, or this afternoon, we'll be looking at the lifelong learning practices standards, which are interesting. There's a bit of a background story that, that we'll get into here in just a moment. But first off, for the 40 of you who are able to get into the Nearpod so far, the rest of you please think and reflect on this, and you can jot it down for your own your own information. If you could just take a moment and type into your computer there, what health standards are you most looking forward to helping teachers implement in their classrooms? So think back to this morning with Heather, and go ahead and type in those answers. So it looks like we have the mental and emotional health, using new standards and strategies, continue to observe. Good, the answers are coming through. We have, I'm wanting to help my teachers be able to implement all of them into our curriculum. So not just one favorite, it's all of them. This is an interesting one. Hygiene is on all of our minds right now, hand washing, etc. It's kind of a funny story. This was planned well before COVID hit, the hygiene section, but it made it more pertinent and more meaningful with our current situation. Let's see, let me do a couple more. Okay, here's somebody else. Proper hand washing, mental and emotional health. They're all great. I was really interested in the first standard, human development. We'll do one more here. The social emotional regulation skills. It's a huge focus as our center, and I like to having more opportunities. Okay. Oh, I guess I should. Okay. So Jamie and Jessica, any progress there?
Yes, I actually can get it going right this very second. The problem is going to be that you're going to want me to share my screen instead of your screen. You're going to have to tell me when to advance the slides, but I'll try to be very in tune with what you need and just read your mind.
Okay. How does it work with recording the session?
It should still record the same. It'll just move from your Nearpod to my Nearpod account.
Okay. Okay.
And so I did put in the, you can see where it says you can use the code joinnearpod.com. And then the code is right there. Okay.
So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And you're okay with that, Jamie, being the slide advancer?
Yep. Okay. And I will try to read your mind as to when you want me to go.
I can do the old thing, like the old recorded, books on tape or something, and make a ping sound.
That'd be great.
It has been way too long since I've heard that ping, Jared. I'm looking forward to that.
Okay, so
the new code is in the chat box, so you're going to have to log into Nearpod again. Our apologies, but now all of you will be able to join.
Okay.
And I've just put it on the slide where it says that you guys just completed with the lifelong learning or the health standards.
Okay, great.
Jamie, you need to share your screen.
Oh, that is a great idea.
Okay, so thanks, Jamie, for advancing there. Really briefly, the agenda, we're going to explore why the lifelong learning practices were added to the early learning standards. We'll spend some time, hopefully I'll be able to get through most of them. There's a lot of information there. We'll become familiar with the lifelong learning practices standards. Then we'll review high leverage practices for supporting learners. That should be reference or something familiar from this morning. And then we'll plan for how to present the lifelong learning practices training to staff. So go ahead, Jamie. And the objectives for today, first is to really understand the purpose for the lifelong learning practices. And then second, gain a deeper knowledge of the standards. Then again, identify the ideas for supporting teachers. And finally, create a framework for delivering lifelong learning practices with professional development. So with all that covered, hopefully you had a good introduction to the new document this morning with Heather. She went over how the document was organized. There's the information about the age, what the standard is, what information is there. This is a list of all of the sections in the new Utah Early Learning Standards. All of them except one, the one we're going to be talking about this afternoon, the lifelong learning practices, are actually aligned with the K through 12 standards. When we were putting together the early learning standards, we had a lot of discussions about what to do for a variety of reasons. First, a lot of the approaches to learning ideas were previously embedded with the science standards. We got new science standards, which were more specific, and they didn't, the ones that ended up in lifelong learning practices didn't really seem to fit there anymore. We also previously had a lot of the social emotional side embedded in health education, social science. There's some in drama. They were all scattered all over the place. And as early childhood educators, that's something that we recognize, that integrated curriculum is essential. But with the approaches to learning not really fitting in science anymore, and really wanting to emphasize the importance of all of the things that ended up in lifelong learning practices, we went back and forth and finally decided that in order to make sure that they are there and clear, they should have their own standard. So as you're looking at vertical alignment, just keep in mind that the lifelong learning practices are really only in the early learning standards. I would love to see them creep up into the other standards, but as of now, that's where they are. A lot of the discussion centered around really the importance of lifelong learning practices in early childhood education. So if you could advance to the next slide, Jamie. I want to illustrate this, as we're talking about the purpose of lifelong learning practices, illustrate this with an interesting example from research on other state pre-K programs. So go ahead, Jamie, to the next one. We're going to explore a little bit. We're going to have a tale of two state pre-K programs. These are both located in the southeastern United States, Tennessee and North Carolina. Both of these programs have been around for several years, which have allowed researchers to really look at the impacts that these programs have. So if you go to the next slide, Jamie, we'll start off talking about Tennessee. Tennessee established their voluntary pre-K program in 2005. And apparently, since Tennessee is the volunteer state, it had to be voluntary. So, that's where that came in. Actually, most programs are voluntary, but it's a Tennessee joke. The Tennessee voluntary pre-K program was funded by lottery money. They had some specific goals. The first goal was to expand access to early learning for at-risk children. We have enough research from many years now to show that at-risk children really benefit from having early learning experience. And then the second focus was to boost school readiness by preparing for kindergarten entry expectations. They were going to be successful if they were able to help their children score well on the assessment scores as they entered kindergarten. So will you go into the next one, please? So Vanderbilt University in Nashville was able to do a program evaluation of the Tennessee pre-K program. The first thing they found, when they looked at the children who went through the program as they entered kindergarten with their kindergarten entry scores, they were scoring on average above the similar children who had not had the pre-K experience. Next slide. But something interesting started to happen. We've talked about in early childhood education, the fade out. Some programs experience fade outs, and they found a fade out happening in kindergarten for the children who are in the pre-K program. Go ahead, Jamie. This advantage that they had in their academic scores at the beginning of kindergarten completely disappeared by second grade. Okay, Jamie, next one. Then by third grade, this was the really interesting, and as an early childhood educator, the really scary thing happened. By third grade, the children overall, the children who had participated in the pre-K program actually scored lower academically than similar children who had not participated in pre-K. So I just want that to sink in for a moment. Yeah, as an early childhood educator, or as early childhood educators, that should really scare all of us. It's like, what was happening? What was going on for why the children who participated in the pre-K program were doing more poorly than children who had not? The Hippocratic oath that physicians take is to first do no harm. And as early educators, I really, really hope that the work that we do is not actually harming the children. So let's take a moment. We have a board here that you can type in, and we'll have to, bounce back probably so that people can see well, I guess you'll be able to show the response. Let's take a moment to think and then post some ideas for why the children in the Tennessee pre-K program might have underperformed their peers who had not had pre-K. And Jamie, I think you have to put allow posting without previewing. Okay. Is anybody else able to post? Okay. Oh,
so Jared, I can see the posts coming up. Can you guys see them?
Yes, I'm bouncing.
Yeah, I can see them. You're gonna have to look on Zoom, Jared.
Yes, I'm bounced back to Zoom. Okay, great. Okay, oh, there I go. We'll get there. Thanks everybody for your patience. Okay, so some of the things that, some of the ideas. Oh, and by the way, you see the little hearts down at the bottom? Somebody liked they didn't teach lifelong learning practices to the kids in preschool. Did somebody read ahead? Okay, anyway, yeah, you can go ahead and post comments. If you're not comfortable posting comments, feel free to just like the other comments. Okay, so they focus too much on academics in pre-K. But wait, we're supposed to focus on academics, but that's kind of interesting. Program quality is one. The parents chose not to participate, may have been more committed to supporting their children's early learning. Okay, that's possible. Foundational skills of self-regulation, self-expression may not have been taught. Lack of good foundation, possibly of lack of support from teachers and parents in school. The big question is, what was the quality incorporating play and relationships? Okay, good, wonderful. Some good thinking, good ideas. Teaching to the test. Okay, so that's so if the focus was on getting ready for the academic test for pre-K, that would be, that could be an issue. Was it more academic than focusing on social emotional? There's a comment in the chat, they weren't socially and emotionally ready. Okay. Oh, it was used as a daycare service rather than a preschool program. Good, okay. Okay, let's go ahead and move to the next slide.
We will, Jared, as soon as I can find it again.
Okay.
To get into the chat box, I had to type something else. And so now it's I'm trying to find that specific tab as a teacher to move it forward.
Okay.
So give me just a second, you guys, I'm sorry.
And thanks again, everyone, for your patience. We're all learning here together, so yeah.
So you guys can see my current slide, right? But that's not the right one.
Right. Okay, it looks like, oh, there we go. Oh, okay.
We see your Google screen, all your Google tabs.
All my open tabs, I know, and that's why I'm like, where did my teacher one go?
Oh.
It's right there.
Okay, there we go, okay.
But that's the student one, not the teacher one that lets me advance the slides.
It's the teacher one so we can see it.
What was that?
I said it's the teacher screen because we can see all the responses, so you just should find how to.
Right, but there's usually a screen on the other side that lets me advance the slides, and that's the one I'm trying to find.
Okay.
But I don't see Nearpod up here anywhere. I had it. You were doing great.
Okay. Is it in a, okay, let's see.
My only problem with this one is if we change the live participation, we're going to have
We'll
to go
have to
out of this
enter.
one and get into a new one again.
And yes, Jamie, technology is oh so fun. Okay.
So if you are all interested in doing another code to get into another Nearpod, I will hurry and push live presentation, and then I will let Jessica handle everything in the chat box from here on out so that I don't lose it.
Okay. But yeah, it's still, okay.
Okay, it's actually
hit the LH.
this one. We're going to push resume.
Bottom where it says open navigator notes, and it should let you advance it.
Okay. Dude. Okay. Would you like to approve? No. Okay, go ahead. That's the teacher one. So we're going to advance that one. Now do you guys see what I see?
North Carolina pre-K?
Yes, there we go. Perfect. Okay, we're there.
I'm staying here. I'm not moving.
So is everybody else, okay, everybody else is still, okay, yeah, we'll get here. Okay, let's talk a little bit about North Carolina's pre-K. North Carolina was launched in 2001. It was also voluntary, even though they're the Tar Heel state, not the volunteer state. Again, they focused on targeting high-risk children. But here's an interesting thing. Their emphasis was reported on approaches to play and learning, social and emotional development, health and physical development, cognitive development, and teacher-child interaction that encourage exploration and discovery. North Carolina was an early adopter of the class assessment system to really focus on those deep, meaningful teacher-child interactions. So go ahead and advance, Jamie. So Duke University, and there's a really interesting study in the journal Child Development documenting this. They found, similarly to Tennessee, the children showed an advantage at kindergarten entry. You know, they scored higher on the pre-K assessment. Go ahead. But then they observed very little fade out, and they actually, with the child development study, they were able to find that even in 5th grade, there was a continued benefit and advantage for the children who had been in the North Carolina pre-K program. So go ahead, Jamie, to the next one. So why the difference? You know, why did they find negative effects in Tennessee, but lasting positive effects in North Carolina? And if you can go to the next one, we do have another board or an open-ended question. I think in the interest of making sure that it goes smoothly, I think I might just leave that as a rhetorical question, but please be thinking about what it could have been that caused the two vastly different results from one to the other. Okay, so I'll talk through some of these, you know, so in the interest of keeping things smooth. Well, a lot of the things were one people that brought up in the previous post-it note little interaction thing. Quality was an issue. The focus was more on the outcomes than really making sure that quality was there. The focus was more on, you know, building the number of children that were involved rather than making sure the foundational quality was there. And then also the things that were brought up, you know, the academic focus, solely academic focus, rather than really looking at the approaches to learning, social, emotional, and really educating the whole child. Interesting follow-up to this. The Vanderbilt study was published, I believe, in late 2015. Of course, the Tennessee legislature went into panic mode. It's like, okay, we've got a problem here. We're putting all this money into programs that's actually harming kids. Let's look carefully at it. They did a really quick study about what we can do to increase quality. And they, starting in 2016, they implemented programs or policies to build the quality, focusing on the whole child of children in Tennessee. And now, 3 years later, in the 2019 study, they found that the children who were in higher quality pre-K programs did have lasting effects. And so, yeah, there's a silver lining there that that they were able to learn from the problems and are able to make those changes. So elsewhere, like here in Utah, as we're ramping up early childhood education, we can definitely take some lessons from that and really focus on quality and educating the whole child. Go ahead to the next slide, please, Jamie. So some takeaway messages to this. The first one is quality matters. As early educators, we cannot focus solely on preparing children for kindergarten entry, A lot of times when people ask, so what's your goal and objective? We're getting our children ready for kindergarten. We need to think beyond that. We must focus on building skills, knowledge, and experiences that will lay the foundation for, and here it is, transitioning in, for lifelong learning. Go to the next slide, please. Here in the state, there's been this recognition of the importance of focusing on lifelong learning. So the USBE, Utah State Board of Education, has been doing some thinking and some studying and put together this document called the Utah Portrait of a Graduate. And I believe I put this, or put the link, or put a copy of this in the shared folder so you can have access to this document. But the purpose of this is to really think about the long-term outcomes. What are the long-term goals, rather than just, okay, are the kids ready, the children ready to go to the next grade? Yes, that's an important part, but it's more, are these children getting the foundations to go on to long-term, lifelong success? And so they identified, they call it the MAP, mastery of information. Second one is autonomy. And finally, the third one is purpose. So they laid out a map for the portrait of a graduate. Can you go to the next slide, please, Jamie? So the A section, the autonomy section here, if you look at it, there's communication. Communicate effectively through reading, writing, speaking, and listening to understand information. Critical thinking has to do with access, evaluate, analyze information, make informed decisions, recognize bias, find solutions, the problem-solving component. Creativity and innovation. Imagine, visualize, really the curiosity and the creativity component. And then finally, the collaboration and teamwork, being able to work with other people in a community of learners. This document also helped guide our thinking as a writing committee. So we're thinking about what foundations are we laying for the long-term learning. So that's the next question. How do we lay the foundation for long-time learning, for lifelong learning? Go ahead, Jamie. So the core of this is in early childhood. Early childhood is a time of tremendous cognitive brain development. There's a lot going on under the hood, so to speak, in children's heads as far as creating the connections and creating the learning foundations, the brain development foundations that will allow them to analyze information, problem solve, connect, interact with others, recognize social cues, emotional cues from others. Go ahead to the next one, please. And so from that, there were some overall guiding principles for the lifelong learning standards. And the first is that positive early learning experiences do provide these foundation for lifelong learning through supporting healthy brain development that will allow the children to be successful learners in all areas. The next one is cognition, relationship skills, the social emotional side that are developed through practice and positive engagement. We'll talk about in a moment that they aren't distinct, but these were kind of the guiding principles. We're going to help children develop that foundation so that they will be lifelong learners. Go ahead, Jamie. So our next test, okay, student view mode is not supported. Oh, crap, okay. Yeah. So, oh, okay, there's the video. Can everyone see this screen that Jamie's sharing?
Yep.
Okay, okay. This is an exploration. This is from the Harvard Center for the Developing Child. This is a little illustration about why this early learning and really developing these lifelong learning skills early is essential. So let's cross our fingers and hope this works. Come on, technology. Go ahead, Jamie. Go ahead and play it. Let's see if
Core capabilities for life. Every day we take on the ordinary, sometimes challenging tasks of work, school, parenting, relationships, and just managing our busy lives. How do we navigate these tasks successfully? And what can send us off course? Science offers an explanation. We all need a set of core capabilities that we can develop with practice over time. Scientists call them executive function or self-regulation skills. And they help us to focus on what's important, to plan ahead, set goals, and meet them. They help us deal with whatever life throws at us and still keep heading where we need to go. They help us resist impulsive behaviors, and change course when we need to. No one is born with executive function skills, but everyone can build them. We build them through a lifetime of making connections within and among the regions of the brain. Our brains begin life with
Okay, Jamie, I think you need to unmute.
They can be watching it on their own screens too.
Okay.
I don't know if
Okay.
she's-
and have new experiences. These complex circuits built throughout childhood and reaching across vast regions of the brain make our core capabilities possible. The more we use these connections, the stronger and faster they become. That's why practice is so important. When we are children, we practice these skills by playing games, learning teamwork, adjusting to new rules. We continue to develop these skills in adolescence by managing school and other things like work, sports, music, and relationships. When we practice executive function skills, circuits rapidly connect the prefrontal cortex to other parts of the brain. These circuits act like an air traffic control system in the brain. They manage incoming information and help us respond with intention, not on impulse. Threatening or stressful experiences activate different circuits, and those trigger automatic responses: fight, flight, or freeze. We need automatic responses for survival, but if stress is constant, these automatic fight or flight circuits become stronger and faster than our more productive intentional circuits, the ones we use for executive function and self-regulation. For anyone under stress, it's hard to call on intentional skills. If we've been experiencing serious stress from our earliest years, the stress caused by poverty, violence, or addiction, a chaotic environment, it's even harder. Under lots of stress every day, it's harder still. The key is counterbalancing those automatic responses by building up our intentional ones, by building strong executive function skills. The good news is these core capabilities can be strengthened. How? By redesigning our systems so they reduce the sources of stress in people's lives, by simplifying how services are provided to families, helping them meet basic needs and building on strengths, because small successes lead to bigger ones. With less stress, we can practice the skills we already have and build new circuits for the intentional responses we need. Stronger brain circuits are built through practice in situations that matter. That's true for children, it's true for adolescents, and it's true for adults. Helping children build skills gives them a strong foundation for all that comes later. Helping teens build their skills propels them into greater success as adults and parents. And helping adult caregivers build their core capabilities ensures success at work, stable homes, and responsive relationships for the next generation. When our communities work together to help children and adults build these skills, we create a positive cycle as one generation passes them on to the next. And that helps us all.
Okay, so hopefully everyone has finished finished viewing the video now. we'll take a break here. Actually, we might postpone the break since we're a little bit ahead of schedule even, because, you know, even with the technology. But I wanted to, before we do that, I wanted to process this, this video a little bit. Really, at the core of that, I hope that you picked up the idea of intentional responses. Basically the idea of, basically the idea that as we learn and develop the skills, you know, because these are all skills that we're talking about. You know, this is not just something that you're just born with. This is something that happens through careful, repeated experience, growing across the early years, and then throughout life. We can develop the skills that allow us to be intentional in our responses. Basically planning ahead, what we want to accomplish, what we want to do. When something happens, when something is thrown at us, being able to access information to know how to respond. Basically, the analogy that I like to use is that these skills that they're talking about here with the lifelong learning practices help us to become the masters of our own ship. Basically, what we're doing is we're focusing on the experience of in early childhood is we're helping children to be ready to make those intentional and, you know, the careful, calculated choices so that they can engage in learning and they can engage in interactions with teachers and peers to make that learning meaningful. They also brought up the idea that small successes early build for later successes later. I put in the resources page that I put in the handouts, there's a link to some work by James Heckman, who is a Nobel Prize winning economist who's focused a lot on early childhood education. And a lot of the ideas that the Center for the Developing Child here present on the importance of developing the early regulation skills and the early approaches to learning skills. He's talked about how these early successes are really foundational for reducing later crime, reducing relationship difficulties, reducing poverty, reducing all of the effects, you know, the negative effects that come from, maybe not all of them, but a lot of the negative effects that come from negative experiences early on can be partially mitigated by being able to develop these skills related to lifelong learning practices. Okay, go ahead, Jamie. We'll skip that break. We're going to we'll take a 10-minute break in a few minutes here, but I wanted to jump in to introduce the lifelong learning practices here. So we're moving to the second portion here, the overview of the early learning standards. Jamie, for the next one. Okay, so the lifelong learning practices are broken into two subcategories. The first one is the approaches to learning, and the second one is the social interaction and development. And I put there, you know, there's the head, you know, that's the regulation side and the cognitive side, and then the heart, which is the social interaction and development. But I want you, as we're discussing these and we're exploring these, really pay attention to how that's not really an accurate distinction. All of the approaches to learning side, the self-regulation, rely heavily on the ability to experience emotions in appropriate ways and respond appropriately. The ability to respond to emotions in appropriate ways and develop relationships, the communication, social engagement, problem solving, those all rely very heavily on the cognitive component related to executive functioning. So yes, that's a way to think about them as separate, but these are all very much closely intertwined. It is indeed true that we're educating the whole child, not just the head or the heart. Go ahead to the next slide. So the introduction to the lifelong learning practices section talks a little bit more about this. It says, approaches to learning describes the underlying processes involved in effective learning in the early childhood years and throughout life. Engaging in learning opportunities that challenge children to advance their knowledge and skill promotes this idea of learning, motivation, and persistence. Next slide. As children are given opportunities to joyfully engage and explore, they develop a lifelong love of learning. So we have the brain component here. We also have the social emotional component. They are all highly intertwined. how these develop or what these look like in an early childhood education classroom is really the principles of developmentally appropriate practice. We're understanding children at where they are and what they need. We're helping to engage them in the learning process. We're providing the scaffolding and the support to help them to experience successes and then reach a little bit beyond their current level to continue learning in order to ultimately achieve the roadmap that the USB has advocated for with the the map there to be lifelong learners. So the first section, the self-regulation and executive functioning, this relies closely, or this is closely associated with development of the prefrontal cortex. There's a little picture there. It's a little bit hard to see because it's small. I put in, there's a couple of handouts that have slides. This picture is on the handout there. But basically the idea here is that the prefrontal cortex, which really regulates this purposeful, intentional thinking, is what we're developing with these skills, or what happens when we're developing the skills. So the four sections here under the self-regulation and executive functioning, or the four standards, are the first to self-regulate behavior, the second is attention focusing, the third is working memory and information processing, and then the fourth is reflection. And we'll talk about each of these individually here coming up. Go ahead to the next slide. So the first one, or I guess before we get on, a little bit of research about lifelong learning practices. These are, a term that's often used with this is the executive function skills. There's been a large, and it's a growing body of research that talk about the importance of these executive functioning skills. Here's just a few of the things. This was a review article of a number of different studies. Go back for a moment, sorry. That they found are associated with executive functioning. Executive functioning predicts the ability to understand and complete math, understanding, basically develop math skills. English language arts with the next set of classes next month in October that Jamie will be teaching. She'll be referring back to these executive functioning skills and how they're essential for developing English language arts. Just put a little plug in there for Jamie's presentation next month. They're also closely intertwined with social emotional success, as well as, and this is kind of an interesting one, physical development. Basically, but there's confusion about what the direction of effect. Is it the people that have high levels of physical development that helps them develop these executive functioning skills, or is it vice versa? In any case, it's exciting to see that, yes, all of these are intertwined, and and these executive functioning skills are predicting these later successes. Okay, go ahead to the next slide. Okay. Oh, this is another video. So let's go ahead and watch this video. This talks about more precisely talks about these executive functioning skills and the benefits of those. So if you could go ahead and play that, Jamie.
Individuals who have well-developed executive function skills look different, not only in their behavior, but also in their brain activity and even in their brain structures. Based on decades of research in developmental neuroscience, it's increasingly clear that when we do anything, when we engage executive function skills in particular and use them, we're activating in our brain. Changes the networks every time. Cognitive flexibility is a skill that depends on networks in the brain. And it's a skill that gets easier with use as the corresponding brain regions become more efficient. They become more efficient in a number of different ways. For example, extraneous connections get pruned away so that you're only left with the circuits that really matter. It really does come down to practice, and one always has to increase the level of challenge in order for that practice to continue to be useful. These are skills just like any other skill, like riding a bicycle or skiing. They may be more or less challenging, and some children may have an easier or a harder time acquiring these skills, but ultimately they can be improved by practice and by self-awareness about what it is that one is learning.
Okay, thanks. Okay, go ahead to the next one here. Okay. Actually, can you, let's see, let's advance to the next one. Yes, because yeah, wasn't sure if the video would work, but yeah, it is. Okay, so if you can take a moment, I'm not sure if you were able to hear that very effectively, but they were talking about what some of the things that teachers and adults can do to help develop executive functioning. I want you to brainstorm some ideas. Go ahead and enter your answer here for what teachers can do to help children to practice some of these executive functioning skills, the purposeful, meaningful behavior. So we have a couple of minutes here. So if you can just think about some different ideas, just some preliminary examples, we'll discuss them here. I don't know, Jamie, are any of the answers coming through yet? Or maybe we have to wait for the timer to end.
There are some that I can share out if you would like me to.
Sure, sure. So some of the ones, make a display schedule to remind of what the day looks like and routines. So that encourages thinking ahead. Teach prediction skills, self-regulation skills. Demonstrate practice through role play. Read, wonderful. Give the students opportunities to practice these skills, okay. Plan and review what activities they're doing throughout the day, kind of the idea of thinking ahead and planning. Students' choices and jobs, okay. Children plan and review what activities they are doing. Okay, wonderful. Student choices, jobs. Model with the child daily and make it part of their learning. Okay, wonderful. Okay, helping students to be more positively engaged in their own learning. So yeah, there's some specific skills, related to the standards that help to accomplish these. In the chat room, games that help them to learn to wait and not be impulsive. Perfect. Some of the fun ones that I like to do is, they had in the video, they had the two puppets, and the idea is that you do what the one puppet tells you to do, but not what the other puppet tells you to do, to include them, to encourage them to, inhibit behavior or then activate behavior. Give open-ended art activities instead of cookie cutter work, good. I do, we do, you do practicing, constant reminders of these skills, perfect practice. Penny also said, I do, we do, you do. All of these help to demonstrate and help that planning process. Model, 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 wonderful. Go to a quiet spot, great. Okay, be sure they feel safe, individualize, and role play. Okay, wonderful. Let's go ahead and wind up there. With that, I believe that it is a good time to take a break. Let's go ahead and take a 10-minute break here. It looks like it's 1:54 now. Let's come back at 2:05. And we'll jump into getting into more of the nitty-gritty of these standards.
I'm just going to chime in again. A lot of people have filled out the breakout room sheet, but we have a lot of people that still haven't put in a breakout room. So I'm going to throw this in the chat. If you're attending by yourself, put your name in the blue box at the top. If you're attending with a team, create a new box and add your team there so that when we get to breakout groups, you're all where you need to be. But yeah, enjoy your break. And what time are we coming back, Jared?
at 2:05. So we have a 10-minute break here. And we'll start right at 2:05. So yeah. Okay, let's go ahead and get back. Hopefully you had a chance to stretch your legs, move around a bit. Thanks for returning. It looks like we have, let's see, everybody back. It looks like we have 86 people in the room. So I believe we're all here. Okay, I'm the doc too. Okay, great. Okay, so I'm going to spend a little bit of time here talking about some of the individual standards. You'll notice here, just like with Heather, when Heather went over them this morning, the LLP for lifelong learning practices, I dropped out the 3-year-old or 4-year-old here because I combined the two just to be general as far as what this encompasses. But this is standard 1.1. And I'll talk about it here as impulse control. Basically, the standard is, in a nutshell, develop the ability to regulate external behavior. Kind of a little silly little aside thing. If you look in the standards, each of the standards in this section, except for this first one, in the little parentheses that give examples, has a section in italics. So for example, 1.2 is attention focusing. 1.3 is working memory and information processing. When we were developing the standards, I was really trying, I wanted to have something that would connect it to the larger body of research. With this one here, I kept going to inhibitory control and excitatory control, but we decided that was just too abstract and too far out there. But just afterwards, after the document was put together, I was like, impulse control, that like encompasses both of those. And so impulse control really should be in italics in that parenthesis there. Although Jessica said, no, we're not going back now, it's done. So yeah, just so you all know, the first section, develop the ability to regulate external behavior, has to do with impulse control. The idea here is to inhibit or restrain some behaviors under the child control while activating or starting other behaviors under the child's control. So kind of an adulting example that you can all probably relate to is the example of the traffic light. What do you do when you're approaching an intersection and the light turns yellow? You have a couple of quick choices, and this is a clear example of this regulating external behavior. Do you decide that you're going to punch the gas and go through it, or do you have time that you can stop? That's the activation, to go through, or the inhibition to stop before you go. Kind of a silly little example that we all see on a day-to-day basis. Some of the research on developing inhibitory control talks about, there's some interesting things. There's some research with twins that show that there are some biological factors up through about 2-year-olds, but after that, the ability to start and stop behavior is largely influenced by experience, which means in an early childhood education classroom with 3- and 4-year-olds, there are some things that we can do to encourage children to activate behavior or inhibit behavior. So some of the examples, and in your packet or in the materials, there's the link to the strategies. When we get into practicing or to planning a little bit later on, I hope that you pull that up to see some of the strategies. But some of the strategies that relate to impulse control would be things like doing the freeze dance, where the music stops and the children have to freeze, and then the music starts again and they start to move. There was the example of the two, in the little video, of the two puppets, one where the children follow what they do, the puppet does, and the other where they don't. These are both examples of inhibitory control. Okay, let's go to the next one here. The next one, standard 1.2, is to develop the ability to focus attention on key components of an object or task. Now this is a little bit trickier because it's not just being able to sit still and listen to what the teachers are saying. That's not really what this captures. This is more of the idea of tuning in to important information and tuning out for less needed information. And as we're talking about the later ones, as far as the social relationships and the interacting, being friends, this is clearly an important skill to have. In the little video, there I don't know if you could hear all what's going on, but they showed the example of the little iPad game where the children were sorting. They had the little, I think it was a purple bunny and an orange pig, and a green pig. And the child had to tune out the color and move the card, the virtual card, to the category of the animal. This is a clear example of tuning into important information, what's the shape, while turning out less needed information for that task of the color. Little example here, I don't know if you're all aware, if you're Mo Willems fans, but did you know that the pigeon, yes, the one that wants the puppy and wants to drive the bus, makes an appearance in every single one of Mo Willems' books? When kids find out this, it's really fascinating to see. It's like, oh, let's see if we can find the pigeon. Usually it's in the front or back cover, but sometimes it's embedded into the book itself. But when children get engaged and involved in this and they have the goal of, I'm going to find the pigeon, it's really fascinating to see how they start to look for specific information. Okay, we want to look for, I know what color the pigeon is. I'm going to start looking for things that are just that color. I'm going to tune out things that are pink because the pigeon is not pink like the pig. The pigeon is gray, the more advanced children that understand, they have gray, to look for that particular image in the book. There's a lot of research about the importance of attention focusing. It's a predictor of graduating from college by the age the child is 25. Basically, preschool attention focusing has that long term of a predicting factor. Children with early attention focusing difficulty are 40% more likely to not graduate. So children who struggle with these skills have difficulty. As with other executive functioning skills, these can be developed through practice and engaging in attention focusing activities. With this, we definitely, bringing in developmentally appropriate practice, there are children who do have cognitive deficits that are very real and very specific related to attention focusing. Please do be aware of the children who there could be neurological issues related to attention focusing, and provide the extra support as necessary. Okay, so the next one, 1.3, these are developing strategies for connecting and remembering information. This is really about the idea of how children, and not just children, because we adults have similar learning strategies, how we learn. In the little parentheses there, this is working memory and information functioning or processing. And how this works, this goes back to your college classes where you're talking about learning theory, specifically Piaget's idea of assimilation and accommodation. So the idea is here, we have the two little pictures here. A child might be exposed to a cat in the family home. They know that cats are small, sometimes they're gray, furry creatures with whiskers and ears. So they develop this schema, or this idea of what a cat is. Then the first time they see a squirrel at the park, really fascinating thing happens. Also, often the children will see that, and at first, if they're not familiar, they will categorize it, sorry for the pun, into the schema of cat. It's the adult's job in that situation to help accommodate the information. It's like, well, it looks like a cat because it's small and furry, but look, the tail is different. Look at how the eyes and the nose are shaped different. That's actually a squirrel. This type of idea of how we talk with the children and help them as they're exposed to new information to connect with similar ideas that they have in the past, or develop new ideas, to build on the similarities and differences there, is really ultimately how information is coded and developed. That type of interaction, where you're helping to guide the conceptual understanding. This is going back to the difference between, potential differences between the Tennessee study, or Tennessee pre-K and North Carolina. This has to do a lot with the types of quality interactions that are captured in, I believe it's item 29 of Ecker's, about the teacher-child interaction, as well as the concept development and quality of feedback sections of class. These types of interactions where we're helping children to take the conceptual understanding and doing something with it in order to be able to generalize and connect additional information is at the core of this standard here, encouraging children to develop strategies for connecting and remembering information. An interesting thing with this is related to information processing. Back in the 90s, there was a big shift in early learning or really learning research, that advocated for looking at intelligence beyond just the traditional intelligence quotient measure. So we got emotional intelligence, and then they broke it down to all sorts of different types of intelligence. There's music intelligence, there's physical intelligence, which were amazing and an important development in understanding individualizing instruction. Some researchers looked at the underlying components of all of these, and they found that there are some unifying features of every different type of intelligence, and these have to do with this idea of processing information, taking information in, storing it in a meaningful way that it can be accessed quickly. So yes, as we're helping children develop skills to code information and then remember information quickly, we are literally helping to build IQ. Okay, next one. Okay, the next standard, recognizing and showing awareness of the thinking process. So here again, the interactions relate to item 29 of Ecker's, where teachers or adults are interacting with children in ways to help them to process, and here specifically to develop the reflection skill or the metacognition skill to be aware of their thought processes, as well as the quality of feedback component of class. So this is the type of thing, and a puzzle is a classic illustration of this. If a young child is doing a puzzle and they're struggling, this is where the scaffolding comes into play to help the child. It's like, oh, what do you notice about this color? Where might this go in the puzzle? Oh, look at the shape here. Oh, yeah, you're right. That is a heart shape, but it has a rooster on it. Can you find the heart-shaped space for the child to go in? How did you know that that's where the pig went? Inviting the child to explain, well, I noticed that there was a lot of brown on the bottom. As we're helping to guide the child's thought process, we are building their cognitive ability and their brain processing ability, which allows them to have those experiences where they can make predictions, where they can solve problems and move forward. So, some research, metacognition predicts later learning success because children become aware of strategies. So, okay, no, sorry, yeah, go ahead and go to the next one. So let's do a little bit of a brain break. It seems like you all have probably been sitting down and listening an awful lot today. So go ahead and go ahead and stand up. We're going to play a little game here. We're going to do a little activity called the Right Family Vacation. So go ahead and stand up wherever you are. Find a pen or anything. It can be, just something that you can hold in your hand for this activity. We're going to help demonstrate some of the self-regulation and executive functioning skills that all of you have hopefully developed. So, you all ready? Here's how this works. I'm going to read a little story about the Wright family. When you hear me say a word that sounds like right, then put the pen or whatever object you found in your right hand. When you hear me say the word that sounds like, or the word that is left, put the pen or other object in your left hand. All right, you all ready? Here we go. Let me tell you a little story. One day, the Wright family decided to take a vacation. The first thing that they had to decide was who would be left at home since there was not enough room in the Wright family car for all of them. Mr. Wright decided that Aunt Linda Wright would be the one left at home. Of course, this made Aunt Linda Wright so mad that she left the house immediately, yelling, "It will be a right cold day before I return." The Wright family now bundled up the children, Tommy Wright, Jason Wright, Timmy Wright, and Shelley Wright, and got in the car and left. Unfortunately, as they turned out of the driveway, someone had left a trash can in the street, so they had to turn right around and stop the car. They told Tommy Wright to get out of the car and move the trash so they could get going. Tommy took so long that they almost left him in the street. Once the Wright family got on the road, Mother Wright wondered if she had left the stove on. Father Wright told her not to worry. He had checked the stove and she had not left it on. As they turned right at the corner, everyone started to think about other things that they might have left undone. No need to worry now. They were off on a right fine vacation. When they arrived at the gas station, Father Wright put gas in the car and then discovered that he had left his wallet at home. So Timmy Wright ran home to get the money that was left behind. After Timmy had left, Susan Wright started to feel sick. She left the car saying that she had to throw up. This, of course, got Mother Wright's attention and she left the car in a hurry. Shelley Wright wanted to watch Susan get sick, so she left the car too. Father Wright was left with Tommy Wright, who was playing a game in the back seat. With all of this going on, Father Wright decided that this was not the right time to take a vacation. So he gathered up all the family and left the gas station as quickly as he could. When he arrived at home, he turned left into the driveway and said, "I wish the Wright family had never left the house today," right? Great, go ahead and have a seat. Yeah, the problem with this is, I wasn't able to really view this, but here's a open-ended thought question for you. If you could take a moment and feel free to look back over information that you have. Can you identify, and write it in the box here, what executive functioning skills did you use while doing this activity? So we'll take about 2 minutes here. If you could think about, review, and then enter the information or enter the response for what executive functioning skills happened.
I've noticed that there's 66 participants on Nearpod, and I know we have more than that in the Zoom room. So you guys are welcome to add your information in the chat box as well, and Jessica and Jared will do what they can to help read off your responses there.
Okay, so there's impulse control, self-regulation, and attention learning. Let's see, problem solving, critical thinking. Okay. I had to listen and pay attention to each word. So there's the paying attention in order to know what I needed to do next. So there again, focusing on key information and tuning out other information. Listening skills, there's multitasking. Tuned out most everything and just listened to the story. Yeah, that's the attention focusing things. Paying attention, listen closely, self-control, flexibility, attention focusing, self-regulation, executive functioning. Wonderful. Switch focusing, so switching from one idea to another or to talk about. I had to be aware of my body to move the item from my left to my right. Focusing on key components. Tuning out information to listen just for left and right. Yeah, there's probably not a lot of the other information about the child getting sick or about Aunt, whatever her name is, that you could remember, because the assignment was to focus on listening specifically for left and right, which is an interesting phenomenon that happens. Focus on key components. Good. Great. Okay. Yes. Okay. Wonderful. Go ahead. Let's move to the next one. Yeah, this is not an example of something that you would necessarily do with children, but there's a lot of similar types of activities that you might be able to do to encourage children to develop these executive functioning skills. And once again, going back to the video before, these are skills that are developed through practice. And so as you're integrating some ideas and some materials or strategies with the children, they will become better at these skills, which will, again, lay the foundation for lifelong learning. Okay, Strand 2, we're going to pick up the pace a little bit because I want to make sure that we have plenty of time for planning. Strand 2, learning engagement, which has the two substrands of initiative and persistence. The idea of initiative substrand really relates directly to this idea of developing a love of learning. The goal here is to help children to become interested in materials and engaged in materials, to help them to experience some learning success. The experiences that they have here, as you're encouraging them to plan out steps to accomplish goals, as you're providing materials and encouraging and asking those follow-up questions, what else can you do with this to explore the immediate environment, and then going back to connecting new information to previous knowledge. These are all things that teachers do in the classroom that fall under the Eckers teacher-child interactions and the class concept development, quality feedback, and language modeling skills. But ultimately, these are what's helping children to develop successful long-term learning ability. Go ahead to the next one. The next one is the persistence substrands. Those are continue with a task through challenges and difficulties and sustain engagement in increasing ways. Persistence has the goal of building learners who are not afraid of challenges. I've noticed with young children, a lot of times, I don't know if it's cultural or societal changes, but a lot of times children are afraid of failure. It's like, oh, I can't do it. It's like, I can't remember where this goes. I can't put this away or whatever. It's this idea of persistence is helping them, through the scaffolding and the modeling that we do with children, to help them understand that, yes, I can do it. There are ways that I can solve this problem and move forward. So persistent skills encourage children to view challenges and failures as stepping stones to success rather than something to become frustrated by and step back from. Basically building that confidence, that can-do attitude to help support them. Okay, go ahead to the next one. Okay, so strand 3 is creativity and curiosity. And here I have highlighted here the asking and answering questions. So yeah, the really encouraging curiosity. We really hope that children will never fully leave that 2-year-old why stage. That why stage, even though it annoys a lot of people, is something that should be celebrated and encouraged throughout, even into adulthood. I think you all should be asking why with all of these things here too, because that's how we learn. Kind of a little parallel process as far as working with adults. One of the things that I've noticed with teachers, I'm not sure if you've noticed, but working with young children in classroom settings is exhausting. It's challenging, and it leads in a lot of cases to burnout. There's some things that we can do as coaches or as mentors or as administrators to help reduce that. And one of the things, with going back to the parallel process here, is encouraging teachers to continue with asking the questions and seeking answers and exploring. It's really a beautiful thing when a child asks a teacher question and the teacher responds, I don't know that. But let's take some time to explore. Let's see what we can figure out. Let me look for a video example of this so we can figure it out. Or here, let's try that. Let's see what would happen if we put the block in this way. That joy of discovery and that curiosity is really something that drives not only children's excitement about learning, but also adults. Okay. Final part here of strand 3 is the creativity. This has engage in problem-solving strategies. I love seeing teachers or other people working with children encourage children to develop problem-solving strategies, and we'll talk a little bit more when we get on the social emotional side. But being able to say, oh, I can't do this, and then seeing the teacher scaffold that by, well, what can you do to solve this problem? When it's reframed as a problem to be solved, that can encourage that more curiosity component of trying things in different ways. And finally, exploring and using materials in play and exploration in new and different ways. And I just have this, I love this little early childhood education humor. The toilet paper roll asking to the other, what happens when we die? We become telescopes or binoculars or footballs or sticks or things to, stethoscopes to listen to hearts or whatever else. Basically looking for ways that we can encourage children to do this. Okay, so let's do another quick collaborative board here, a collaboration board. you've probably heard the example of how many different uses can you think of for a paper clip? Since you've probably all done that before, we're going to try a different one. Think for a moment here, and then I would love to have you post in this little discussion board here, what are multiple things, or what are different things that you can think of to use a paper plate for? So go ahead and take a moment and think, and enter that into your Nearpod slide here. Masks, wonderful. A paint tray, that's very practical. A snake, I'm curious about how it can be a snake. Probably by cutting into a coil. Ooh, that could be cool. Musical instruments. I've seen people put seeds inside too to make a shaker. Steering wheel, fish art project. Use it up, roll it up and use as a funnel. Painting faces. Ghost decor coming up on your frisbee, sundial. Fold it in half, fill with beans. Staple, makes a musical instrument. Yeah, wonderful. For a pumpkin, the sun, cut it in spiral, hang it from the ceiling, square pumpkin. Okay, wonderful. Great ideas, great creativity. Yeah, wonderful. Okay, yeah, that's just a little example about this idea with creativity of thinking outside the box, so to speak, about different ways to use a product or an object. Okay, so those are the things that fall under the approaches to learning side. This is the social interaction and development side of the equation here for lifelong learning practices. The State Board of Education has discussed and identified what are the components of social emotional development. And just really briefly, these are the things that, the working definition, so to speak, of what social emotional development encompasses. The first is understand and manage emotions. Emotions are a big key component of communication and of life. Set and achieve positive goals. So going back to some of the previous standards of being planful, laying out step-by-step ways to approach problems. Feeling and showing empathy for others. Establishing and maintain positive relationships. Making responsible decisions. And finally, self-advocate. There's a lot of information packed into these bullets. A lot of it has to do with the child understanding him or herself, and also understanding their relationship with others, understanding other people's points of view, kind of the idea of empathy, which is something that's really fascinating from a cognitive development perspective. And it's something that develops over a period of several years, but there's some things that we can do as teachers or people working with children to help develop these aspects. So go ahead to the next one, please, Jamie. So the social interaction and development has 3 strands with several substrands under the relationship side. These are self-awareness, emotions, relationships, and the substrands under relationships are the idea of effective communication, social engagement, and conflict resolution and problem solving. So we'll dive into each of these in a little bit more detail here too. So go to the next one, please, Jamie. Okay, so the first strand, self-awareness. Self-awareness is the idea of the child becoming aware of their own identity, including their personal information, their name, their, who they belong to, possibly later on where they live, their characteristics, preferences, and abilities. From a cognitive developmental standpoint, that's essential because that helps them. And sorry, Jamie, I was a little, yeah. Being self-aware leads to the ability for a child to think about and realize how their behaviors and actions impact the world outside of them immediately. So some of the aspects of the approaches to learning side really have to do with the idea of cause and effect, what the child can do to have an impact on other things outside of them, which lays the foundation of being able to plan how to solve a problem or how to achieve a goal. So this idea of self-awareness, even though it's on this social emotional side, is it's really foundational to really being able to understand a lot of or develop the cognitive or the other side, the approaches to learning side of being able to recognize the outcomes that they can have and influences they have on their environment. Okay, now go ahead to the next one. So the next standard, participate in self-selected or organized activities by exploring learning materials, including outdoor equipment. Just kind of a little aside, going back to the thinking of the writing committee. We had quite a few discussions on how we really wanted to communicate that learning, self-awareness, self-regulation really happens in a beautiful way in the outside environment or the outdoor classroom. And so, you know, this language here, by exploring learning materials, including the outdoor equipment, is really to highlight that idea that outside is still very much prime learning time. It opens up a whole new world, so to speak, of things that the child can engage with and explore and experience. And so as you're working with the teachers in your program, or as you're working with the children in your classrooms, please think, you know, very intentionally about what you can do in the outdoor space to really encourage this learning. But here particularly, it's going back to self-awareness. It's helping the child understand what types of activities they like to do. What are some of the things that they're good at? What are some of the things that they might not be so good at that they might want to develop, both inside and in the outside setting? So that goes back to the idea of initiative and persistence, Substrands 2. Okay, so the next standard under self-awareness is to begin to be aware and learn to maintain personal boundaries while participating in movement and daily classroom activities. So again, this idea of I have my own sphere here that I am functioning within. There's other people around me who are separate from myself, and I need to learn to, there again, the impulse control, regulate my behavior in a way that preserves my boundaries while respecting others. Just a little aside about this picture here. This was, you know, I pulled this out. This was from when I first started teaching preschool years and years ago. I put together a training for the Office of Head Start a couple of years, I guess it's probably about 3 years ago now. And I incorporated this picture and I realized it's like, oh, those children in that picture at that time were as old as I was when I was teaching that class. So yeah, it really kind of made me feel old. So, okay, let's move on to the next one. The next strand under self-awareness, 4.4, is communicates wants and needs, including thoughts and feelings with actions and words. We really, kind of the idea here is to really provide that scaffolding and support to children to help them to realize the variety of different ways that people communicate. So, you know, whether it's pointing, facial expressions, eye contact, body language, differences in verbal tone. This leads, you know, this is connected, you know, kind of reaching back to the approaches to learning side, being able to tune into key information. And so as the teacher pulls the child aside, it's like, oh, look at this other child's face. Look what's happening to their mouth. It looks like they're sad. See how their mouth is turned down? Look at how their eyes are kind of closing a little bit. As the teacher works with the child to highlight those aspects and then talk about, why do you think this other child is showing this facial expression? Oh, I think that means that this child's sad. Let's figure out why this child is sad. All of those things help to focus attention and then help make predictions and understanding, which will lead to the ability to develop the perspective taking skills, which are key elements of social emotional development and being able to interact with other people in a meaningful way. So the next one, also having to do with creating a sense of community, which has overlap with the social studies domain too. Begin to contribute and take pride in the classroom community. Helping the child to recognize, oh, the behaviors that I do here in the classroom impact the other people around me. As I work with other people, as I share materials, or as I talk or help collaborate in building a block structure. As I'm interacting with other people, I am helping to create a positive learning experience for myself and for the people around us. There are some specific things that I think came up in some of the previous discussion boards here, just helping children to develop a sense of responsibility by taking on chores and responsibilities in the classroom, the helper charts, all of those things can help to build these skills of helping the child take pride in the classroom community. There again, I would please encourage you to think larger scale here too of what the child is learning about their role, their civic role in society as far as helping to create a positive experience for the broader community. Okay, so let's do another little brain break. I've been talking at you for quite a few minutes here. Let's take some time to decompress a little bit and think a little bit here. I have a little discussion board on the next slide, but here's what I'd like you to do. I'd like you to imagine that an author has written you into their story as a very minor character. You probably only show up in maybe 1 or 2 paragraphs, but they want to introduce you in a way with a single sentence that will communicate your character. So for an example here, it would be something like, Kristoff is the kind of human who is much more comfortable talking to reindeer than to other humans. In just that one sentence, we get a pretty good idea about what kind of a person Kristoff is. So take a moment, a minute or two to think here and post in the discussion board here your 1-sentence character description that describes you. Though she be little, she be fierce. I love it. Oh, beautiful. I'm trying to enter mine, but it's not letting me. Okay, here we are. Okay. Ooh, she's a helper. That packs a lot into one little sentence. There's mine. I've been thinking about this for a while. Jared is the type of person who finds it impossible to make a long story short. I think that sums me up. She's a positive and kind. She likes to relax as much as possible, enjoy the small things. Okay. She's the type of person who wants to be friends with everyone, but not draw too much attention to herself. Okay, that adds a lot of information. She feels like she's an average, everyday mom, but if you ask her kids, they will say she is crazy. I love it. Yeah. Trisha will talk in circles and ramble with adults, but is clear and concise with preschoolers. Wow. Brave, hardworking director, handles life with a loving heart. Beautiful. Okay. She's a happy person who tries to look for the good in life. So yeah, I can see a lot of your characters, that even if you're just a minor, and I think for a lot of you here, you should be more than just a minor character in this book, because this is interesting. Short, yet colorful, goofy person. My perfect day is enjoying a family pack of double stuffed Oreos and a Coke while laying on the beach. Oh, wow. Okay, wonderful. All right, let's go ahead and move on here. Thanks for playing. And that's kind of, yeah, that's a fun little exercise in self-awareness. We won't do a discussion board on this, but this is more of some things for you to think about. How hard or easy was it to describe yourself that briefly? To kind of sum up your character in just a few words. And the next thing, this activity is really, meant for people who have had the opportunity to read different books and see minor characters coming in and out. What would be a child appropriate activity to help children begin to be aware of their own characteristics? Like I said, we won't do a discussion board on this, but yeah, please be thinking about that a little bit, about how you would translate a similar type of activity, or what you might do when you're working with young children. Okay, so the next section, Strand 5, emotions. Strand 5.1 is to separate and reunite with parents and caregivers without stress. This is a more specific type of skill. It's specific to the pickup and drop off time, but it still has to do with the bigger picture of lifelong learning practices and helping to make predictions and understand, okay, so I miss my parents when they're gone, but they will be coming back. Some things here where we're talking about emotions. It's important to recognize that emotions are perhaps our most basic form of communication. From a very, very early age, early infancy, and Jamie, can you go back a little bit to the previous slide? We learn to recognize the emotions of others. You've probably seen the example of the still face experiment, where the parent is interacting with the infant, and the parent stops smiling and engaging and just provides a still face. And the child, most of these still face experiments, becomes really concerned and does everything they can to try to engage, because they recognize that something isn't matching with the emotional expression. So as we're understanding emotions and recognizing emotions, it's really key to understand that yes, emotions are a key component of all of our experience on a daily basis. We could spend quite a bit of time here talking about the different emotions that we've probably all experienced today. And hopefully, well, boredom is more of a feeling rather than, anyway, hopefully you haven't been too bored today. Just a little aside warning here a little bit though. As we're working with this skill of separating, reuniting with parents, please be very aware of individual children's unique situations. Some children may have experienced early trauma, which makes separations and reunions rather difficult. Please be very understanding and support and encourage the child there, recognizing that there are some other factors that could influence the separation and reuniting behavior. Some other things that you can do is, this is an important time to watch for signs and symptoms, perhaps possible warning signs of potential abuse or neglect. I know a lot of teachers that are thrilled when the child is very, very happy to leave their parents and to come to class. It's like, oh, look, they like it here better than at home. That should never, ever be an experience or a goal there. You should never have a goal to be a better situation than at home. You need to recognize the challenges and possible struggles and possible warning signs. But yes, this isn't a competition. The child should love being with you and with their big people or other family members. So just keep that in mind here. Okay, so the next one, standard 5.2, recognizing that feelings can change and different feelings are experienced throughout the day. Here, one of the big things is to give children the permission to experience emotions. I get really concerned with the if you chance to meet a frown, do not let it stay view, that it's like, oh, you should be happy, because that's not the real world lived experience of people. Yes, we like to be happy, but because we're humans and we have different likes and dislikes and experiences and parts of the frustration and rejection and disappointment as part of life, we need to recognize that all of these emotions have value and are important, and help support children in experiencing these and understanding that, yes, you might feel this way now, but a bit later, you might feel different. You can even build in the cognitive component. It's like, what is it that's making you feel sad? Or you look really excited. Why are you excited? What are you excited about? As you help the child to think about and process their emotional experience, you're also building their brain development and the bigger picture of lifelong learning practices as well. So just some take homes there. All emotions are important and should be honored and valued. So the next section, the next 3 standards, these are duplicates from the health education area that you were able to talk about and explore a bit this morning. So we won't spend too much time here, but just keep in mind here that a big part of this, and I kind of like to think of that with the health education, it's really helping to understand the individual child, helping the child understand themselves. With them being duplicated here, I like to think of them in the component or the context of developing regulation, being able to understand their feelings, which is a part of themselves back in the health education side, and then build on that to have appropriate responses to the emotions that they're experiencing. One interesting thing about this is that, yes, they are duplicate standards. They're the same standards in the health education and here, but it's a similar thing in the Head Start Early Learning Outcomes framework. The emotional self-regulation is both in the approaches to learning side and the social and emotional development too. So there is that bigger picture connection there. Okay, let's go to the next one. The next strand 6 is relationships, and the substrand 1 is communication. Here, the standard is respond appropriately to tone of voice, facial expression, and gestures of peers and adults. Going back once again to looking at the paying attention to, attention focusing and other details there. Okay, thanks. Okay, perfect. Okay. All right, let's go on to the next one here. I want to make sure that you have time to plan here, so we're going to move a little bit faster. We're coming up to the end here. The next one is standard 6.2, communicate by others by attending to and responding to peers and adults individually or in group. Reading environmental cues to recognize intentions of others, as well as to how to communicate the child's own intentions in a way that make group interactions meaningful and engaging. Okay. I think, okay, this is another duplicate from health education. So let's go ahead and move on. Okay, 6.3, show interest in peers by getting their attention in appropriate ways. There's some specific things that can be done there. I'm going to make this fast so that you do have time for planning. So let's go ahead to the next one. Here again, maintain awareness and respect for others' personal space and begin to maintain self-control during play. Then really focusing on the play side of things, positive social interactions, plays, and then also show appreciation for the actions and choices of others. Here, like I said, we're going to skip through here so that we're sure to have time for planning. The final strand here is the conflict resolution and problem solving. And I wanted to spend a little bit more time on here because we're here coming full circle. With the approaches to learning, there was a big section or a big component of that is the idea of problem solving. Here again, it's using those cognitive skills or the cognitive abilities to really focus on the needs and intentions of others and working together on shared goals in order to solve those problems and disagreements. Okay, so go ahead and move here. I'll just give a really brief moment here. That's the end of the strands here. The question is, will we be able to get linked to this PowerPoint by chance? Yes, I will post that into the shared folder, definitely. If there are any questions or any particular strands or standards you'd like me to address in greater detail at all here, please do. We'll take just a few seconds here, and then we'll move on to giving you a chance to plan. And Jamie, if there's any that come up, please do share them.
I was just going to let you know there are none at this point, so I'll give it probably 10 more seconds and then I'll just advance.
Okay. Yeah, probably at this point, people are kind of, yeah, we've been spending a lot of time here. It's about time to kind of shift gears here. We won't do this breakout. There is a little worksheet handout in your folder. It's just kind of a little challenge to be thinking about the bigger picture. I would encourage you, here, I'll give you homework. Here's your homework. Use the information from the lifelong learning practices section of the PEEP to go through and look at where they fit into the lifelong learning practices standards. So, okay, go ahead. Okay, I did have a brief break. Yeah, let's take about a 3-4 minute break. Okay, it's 2:55 now. Let's take a 5-minute break, and then when we come back, we'll jump right back into the planning component. But I wanted to give you all a chance to stand up, stretch, so that you can be focused when we come back. Okay, let's go ahead and continue here. Yeah, hopefully you had a little chance to stretch and move around a bit. We're on the home stretch. We have a half hour left. I'm going to transition quickly as possible here to getting you into your planning groups so you can plan for ways to implement or to teach or support teachers in implementing lifelong learning practices. So go ahead. Let's see if I can, okay. So what we're going to do is you have some resources in your packet. You have the planning checklist. I've also included the strategies and activities. Yeah. Also remember that the lifelong learning practices are specific to the preschool standards. So as you're planning and thinking about your developing a framework for lifelong learning practices, professional development, keep that in mind. There are some things that we're going to skip that will be in, if you want to look at the slides. There's some parallel processes relating to the high-level practices that Heather went over with you this morning. I have the information about high-level practices also in the folder now. So let's take a few minutes. Let's go ahead. We'll break out into the chat rooms so you can work specifically with your teams. Or the people who are not in teams, can work together. So can we go ahead and
Yes, we can.
Jessica, can you go ahead and activate the
I will.
the work rooms? I can bounce up to some of the different ones.
Yeah.
But if you do have any questions, please feel free to send me a message in chat, and yeah, we will move forward. Yeah, so once again, please use the resources in the folder as far as the strategies and activities, as well as the checklist for planning that's included there.
Everybody's back.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. I know that 25 minutes is not enough time to really fully plan for implementing lifelong learning practices in professional development in your programs, but hopefully it give you an opportunity to look at some of the resources and do some initial planning. I didn't really talk about it too much before I just mentioned it, but in some of the groups that I jumped into, please do use the companion document to the learning standards called the Strategies and Activities. That's included in the material that Jamie sent out. It should be accessible in the shared folder. But what that has is you can go through, and it has for each standard, it has some possible activities or some suggestions for things that you can do with children to help the children develop those skills. So yeah, I hope that was helpful and productive. Oh, and Jessica just sent the link to that in the chat box.
Estoy en entrenamiento y haciendo cosas.
Okay, so just a really brief recap and conclusion here. As far as the purpose and the importance of lifelong learning practices, I hope that as you've been thinking about these today, you've recognized that these are they're intended to be, and we discussed them as the writing committee, these are foundational. These are skills that will help the child in every other area of development. So they are intended to be integrated. They're things that, there are skills that can be learned. As you're planning and working with the teachers, please encourage them to think about all sorts of different ways to really explore and promote those development. Yeah. Another thing, we don't have too much time with this. I want to make sure that there's some final, okay, yeah, go ahead. You can move it to the next one here. I wanted to give you a chance, just really briefly, if there are any final comments or questions before we move forward, or before we end, here's your chance to ask them. But yeah, I hope that these will be meaningful and helpful as you are working with professional development with your staff. But once again, please do keep the big picture that these standards need to be implemented and these are foundational. So, okay, I'll give just a few seconds here if there's any questions. If not, then we'll go ahead and conclude, because I know that there's some things that Jamie or Jessica wanted to conclude with. So Jamie, are there any questions that come through? Probably at this point in the day, everybody's just spent. It's been a long morning. It's been a long afternoon. Thank you so much, everybody, for sticking with us and being so adaptable.